Welcome to another journey into the unexplained. My name is MK, and tonight we're going to explore 6 mysteries that shouldn't exist. These aren't your typical ghost stories. These aren't urban legends passed down through generations. These are documented cases, witnessed by multiple people, investigated by scientists and authorities. And yet, they remain completely unexplained. Some of these mysteries will make you question what you think you know about consciousness. Others will challenge your understanding of history itself. One will make you look at animals in a completely different way. But here's what makes these cases truly extraordinary. They're not ancient myths shrouded in the fog of time. Many of these events happened in the modern era, documented with photographs, official reports, eyewitness testimony. And still, no one can explain them. Tonight, you'll hear about 2 young girls who died tragically, only to seemingly return in the bodies of twins born a year later. You'll discover why hundreds of dogs have jumped to their deaths from the same bridge in Scotland. You'll learn about 2 men found dead on a Brazilian hillside, wearing masks made of lead. These stories will take you from the quiet streets of England to the tropical hills of Brazil, from the snowy countryside of Victorian Devon to the cobblestone streets of medieval Suffolk. So get comfortable. Let your mind open to possibilities you might have dismissed before. Because what you're about to hear is absolutely real, absolutely documented, and absolutely impossible to explain. Let's begin. Mystery 1. The Pollock Twins. Proof of reincarnation. Our first mystery takes us to a quiet town in northern England. The year is 1957. Hexham is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. The streets are narrow and winding, lined with stone cottages that have stood for centuries. It's a community where children play freely, where neighbors watch out for one another. The Pollock family lives in one of these cottages, John and Florence Pollock, and their 2 young daughters, Joanna, age 11, and Jacqueline, just 6 years old. By all accounts, they're a happy family. The girls are inseparable. Joanna, the older sister, is protective and nurturing. Jacqueline follows her everywhere, copying her movements, wanting to do everything her big sister does. May 5th, 1957. It's a Sunday morning. The church bells are ringing across Hexham, calling the faithful to Mass. Joanna and Jacqueline are walking to church with a friend, taking the same route they've walked dozens of times before. The sun is shining. It's the kind of perfect spring morning that makes you grateful to be alive. And then, in an instant, everything changes. A car comes around the corner. The driver, a local woman, has lost control. The vehicle mounts the sidewalk, heading straight for the 3 girls. Their friend sees it coming. She manages to throw herself out of the way. But Joanna and Jacqueline, they don't have time to react. Both girls are killed instantly. The entire town of Hexham goes into mourning. You have to understand, In a small community like this, everyone knew these children. Everyone had watched them grow up. John and Florence Pollock are devastated beyond words. What parent could ever recover from losing both their daughters in one horrific moment? But John Pollock is a deeply religious man. He's a Catholic, but he also believes in reincarnation, something his church officially rejects. In the weeks and months after the accident, he begins to pray. He prays that God will send his daughters back to him. His wife thinks he's losing his mind with grief. His priest tells him he's committing heresy. But John Pollock continues to pray, continues to believe. October 4th, 1958. Just 17 months after the accident, Florence Pollock discovers she's pregnant. The doctor tells her she's going to have a single child. He can only detect one heartbeat. They schedule the delivery for a hospital in a nearby town. But John Pollock makes a prediction that seems impossible. He tells everyone who will listen that his wife is going to have twins, identical twin girls. And he says these twins will be his daughters returned to him. People think he's had a complete mental breakdown. October 4th, 1958. Florence goes into labor. And John Pollock is right. She gives birth to identical twin girls. Even though every medical examination had indicated a single baby, even though there was only one heartbeat detected, 2 babies are born. They name them Jennifer and Gillian. Now, you might say this is just a coincidence. Doctors make mistakes. Ultrasound technology in the 1950s wasn't what it is today. Maybe they simply missed the second heartbeat. But here's where the story becomes truly impossible to explain. When the twins are born, Jennifer, the younger twin by 10 minutes, has 2 distinctive birthmarks. One is on her forehead, directly above her right eyebrow. The other is on her left hip. These aren't just any birthmarks. The mark on her forehead is in the exact same location where Jacqueline, the younger of the 2 deceased sisters, had a scar from falling off her bicycle. The mark on her hip corresponds precisely to a distinctive birthmark that Jacqueline had. The medical staff is baffled. What are the odds? They wonder that this newborn would have marks in the exact same locations as the dead child. But John Pollock isn't surprised at all. He believes this is confirmation. His prayers have been answered. His daughters have returned. The family returns to Hexham with the newborn twins. For the first few years, nothing particularly unusual happens. The girls grow up as normal children. But Florence and John can't help but notice there's something about their personalities. Gillian, the older twin, is naturally protective and maternal, just like Joanna had been. Jennifer, the younger, is more dependent and follows her sister everywhere, just like Jacqueline did. But personality similarities could be explained away. Lots of siblings have similar dynamics. Then, something happens that can't be explained away so easily. when the twins are 3 years old, the Pollocks decide to show them some old toys that had belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline. These toys have been packed away in a closet for years. The twins have never seen them before. Florence brings out 2 dolls. One had been Joanna's, the other Jacqueline's. Without any prompting, without anyone telling them anything, Gillian immediately picks up Joanna's doll, and Jennifer picks up Jacqueline's. Not only do they each choose the correct doll, but they also know the dolls' names. Names they had never been told. Florence Pollock feels a chill run down her spine. How could they possibly know this? But there's more. So much more. The twins begin to play games together. One of their favorite games is what they call the car accident game. They've never been told about how their sisters died. Their parents have deliberately kept this information from them, thinking they're too young to understand. But the twins will sit on the floor, and one will cradle the other's head, saying things like, "The blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you." Their parents are horrified. These are the exact injuries that Jacqueline suffered. How could they know? When the twins are 4 years old, the family takes a trip. They drive to the town where Florence had given birth, a place the twins have never been to before. They've never even seen photographs of it. But as they drive through the streets, Jennifer and Gillian start pointing out landmarks. There's the school Joanna went to. That's the park where we used to play. They're right. Every single time. These are places that Joanna and Jacqueline knew. Places they had visited when visiting relatives in this town. But Jennifer and Gillian have never been here. The most disturbing incident happens shortly after. The family is walking past the spot where the accident occurred, the exact location where Joanna and Jacqueline were killed. Again, the twins have never been told about this. But suddenly, both girls freeze. They start screaming in terror. The car is coming to get us. They clutch each other, crying hysterically, describing the accident in detail. Details they should have no way of knowing. Their parents are shaken to their core. Word of the Pollock twins spreads beyond Hexham. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist from the University of Virginia, hears about the case. Dr. Stevenson has spent decades investigating claims of reincarnation, documenting over 3,000 cases worldwide. He comes to interview the Pollock family extensively. He documents everything: the birthmarks, the memories, the knowledge the girls shouldn't possess. Dr. Stevenson becomes convinced this is one of the strongest cases for reincarnation he's ever encountered. But here's something interesting. As the twins grow older, their memories of being Joanna and Jacqueline begin to fade. By the time they're 7 or 8 years old, they no longer recognize the old toys. They don't talk about the accident anymore. They don't point out familiar places in towns they've never visited. It's as if whatever connection they had to those past lives simply dissolves. They become fully and completely Jennifer and Gillian. Today, both women are still alive. They've lived full lives, had careers, families of their own. They've given interviews over the years, confirming the details of their parents' accounts. They admit they don't remember the memories they had as small children, but they don't doubt that those memories were real at the time. So what explains the Pollock twins? The skeptics say it's a case of suggestion, that perhaps the parents unconsciously guided the girls toward these memories. That John Pollock, in his grief and his firm belief in reincarnation, somehow implanted these ideas in his daughters' minds. But how does that explain the birthmarks? How does it explain knowledge of names they were never told? Or places they had never visited? Some psychologists propose a theory called genetic memory. The idea that somehow information from Joanna and Jacqueline could have been encoded in the parents' DNA and passed on to the twins. But this theory has no scientific basis. We simply don't have any mechanism that would allow specific memories to be transmitted genetically. Others suggest it's pure coincidence, that the birthmarks are random, that the girls' knowledge can be explained by overheard conversations, that their parents don't remember telling them. But when you add up all the coincidences, the twin birth predicted against medical evidence, the birthmarks in exact locations, the specific knowledge, the personality correspondences, the spontaneous recognition of trauma at the accident site. At what point does coincidence become impossibility? Dr. Stevenson believed this case provided strong evidence that consciousness can survive death. That somehow, in ways we don't understand, the souls or consciousness of Joanna and Jacqueline returned. But even he couldn't explain the mechanism. How would this work? Why would it happen? And why did the memories fade as the girls grew older? The case of the Pollock twins remains one of the most well-documented and most puzzling cases in the study of reincarnation. It's been investigated, analyzed, debated for over 60 years. And still, no one can provide a satisfactory explanation. Two girls died tragically on a sunny Sunday morning. 17 months later, two girls were born who seemed to remember being them. Coincidence, reincarnation, or something else entirely? The answer remains a mystery. Our next mystery takes us halfway around the world, to a tropical hillside in Brazil, where two men wearing lead masks were found dead, with a cryptic note that raises more questions than answers. Mystery 2. The lead mask case. Death on Vintém Hill. The year is 1966, August 20th. Vintém Hill sits on the outskirts of Niterói, a coastal city across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. It's an unremarkable place, covered in dense vegetation where the humid air clings to your skin, and the tropical sun beats down mercilessly. A young boy is flying his kite in the area. The wind carries it higher and higher, dancing against the blue sky. And then suddenly, the string breaks. The kite drifts down into the thick brush on Vintém Hill. The boy follows, pushing through the undergrowth, branches scratching at his arms, looking for his toy. And then he sees something that will haunt him forever. Two men, lying side by side on their backs, perfectly positioned, as if they deliberately arranged themselves. They're wearing formal suits, dark fabric that seems absurd in this heat and this remote location. Each man has a raincoat carefully folded beneath his head, like makeshift pillows. But that's not what makes the boy scream. Both men are wearing crude masks made from lead. The masks cover their eyes. Heavy, metallic, utterly bizarre. The boy runs, crashing back through the vegetation, screaming for help. The police arrive at Vintém Hill within the hour. What they find is one of the strangest crime scenes in Brazilian history. The two men are eventually identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz, 32 years old, and Miguel José Viana, 34. Both are electronics technicians from the city of Campos dos Goitacazes, about 100 miles north of Niterói. They're dead, but there's no obvious cause of death. No wounds, no signs of violence, no indication they were attacked or killed by another person. No signs of struggle whatsoever. They simply look like they calmly lay down, put on their strange lead masks, and died. The police search the immediate area. Next to the bodies, they find a small notebook, water-stained but still legible. The last entry in this notebook contains a set of instructions that make no sense. Written in Portuguese, in neat, careful handwriting. The note reads, 16:30 hours. Be at determined place. 18:30 hours. Swallow capsules. After effect. Protect metals. Await mass signal. The investigators read this over and over, trying to extract meaning from these cryptic words. Swallow capsules. After effect. Protect metals. Await mass signal. What does any of this mean? The investigation begins to reconstruct the final days of Manuel and Miguel. On August 17th, 3 days before their bodies were discovered, the two men left their hometown of Campos dos Goitacazes. They told no one where they were going. They simply left. They traveled by bus to Niterói. Witnesses at the bus station remember seeing them. Two men in formal suits, carrying a single bottle of water between them. They seemed calm, purposeful, like men on a mission. They arrived in Niterói in the early afternoon. From the bus station, they went to a local shop, where they purchased 2 raincoats. The shop owner remembers this transaction clearly. He thought it was odd. The sky was perfectly clear that day. Not a cloud anywhere. Why would two men buy raincoats on such a beautiful day? He also noticed that one of the men kept checking his watch, looking at it repeatedly, as if they were on a tight schedule. After buying the raincoats, Manuel and Miguel were seen walking toward Vintém Hill. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. Now, here's where the mystery deepens. The police determined that the men died on August 17th, the same day they arrived in Niterói, probably sometime in the evening, based on the condition of the bodies. But here's the problem. Their bodies weren't discovered until August 20th. 3 full days later. In the Brazilian heat, in that tropical climate, bodies decompose rapidly. Within days, certainly within 3 days, there should have been significant decomposition. But when the police examine the bodies, they're remarkably well preserved. Too well preserved. It's as if they died much more recently. Maybe even the night before they were found. But that doesn't match the timeline. It doesn't match the witnesses who saw them on the 17th. The police send the bodies for autopsy, hoping that a medical examination will reveal the cause of death. And here, the case becomes even stranger. The medical examiner begins the autopsy, but due to a bureaucratic mix-up, due to miscommunication between departments, the examination is incomplete. The examiner determines there are no external injuries, no signs of violence. And then, incredibly, before conducting toxicology tests, before examining the internal organs thoroughly, the bodies are released. Released and buried. By the time the police realize this mistake, by the time they understand that crucial evidence has been lost, it's too late. The bodies are in the ground. And in 1966, Brazil, there's no legal mechanism to order an exhumation, not without proof of foul play. So the cause of death is never determined. The investigators turn their attention to the evidence they do have. The lead masks, the cryptic note, the strange circumstances. They interview friends and family of the two men. What they discover paints an interesting picture. Manuel and Miguel were both deeply interested in spiritualism. Specifically, they were involved in something called Spiritism, a belief system popular in Brazil that combines elements of Christianity with the idea that you can communicate with the dead. But they weren't just casual believers. They were obsessed. Friends say the two men had become increasingly fixated on the idea of contacting spirits. They talked about achieving higher planes of consciousness, about transcending the physical world. In the months before their deaths, they had been attending seances regularly. They spoke about receiving messages from the spirit world, instructions about how to elevate their consciousness to a higher level. And here's something chilling. Just days before their trip to Niterói, Miguel had told a friend that he and Manuel were about to make contact with superior beings. They believed they were going to meet extraterrestrials. The lead masks, investigators theorize, might have been meant to protect their eyes from some kind of intense light. The kind of light you might encounter if you believed you were about to witness a UFO landing. The note makes more sense now, doesn't it? 16:30 hours. Be at determined place. They had to be at Vintém Hill at a specific time. 18:30 hours. Swallow capsules. They took some kind of drug, possibly to alter their consciousness, to prepare themselves for the encounter. After effect. Protect metals. Once the drug took effect, put on the lead masks to protect themselves. Await mask signal. Wait for the extraterrestrials to arrive. But something went wrong. The police theory is that the capsules they swallowed weren't just consciousness-altering drugs. They were poisonous, either by accident, a fatal miscalculation of dosage, or by design, a deliberate suicide pact. They lay down on that hillside, put on their lead masks, and waited to ascend to a higher plane. But instead of ascending, they simply died. But this theory doesn't explain everything. If they died from poisoning, what specific poison did they take? Why were there no visible symptoms? No signs of distress? Most poisons cause convulsions, vomiting, some visible sign of suffering. But these men looked peaceful, as if they simply fell asleep. And what about the preservation of the bodies? How do we explain that? Some researchers have proposed alternative theories. One theory suggests they were murdered, that they were involved in some kind of illegal activity, perhaps electronic smuggling, and they were killed by associates. The elaborate staging, the masks, the note, all designed to make it look like a bizarre suicide. But this doesn't explain the note in their own handwriting. It doesn't explain why they traveled to this specific location voluntarily. Another theory involves secret government experiments. Brazil in the 1960s was undergoing political turmoil. Some researchers speculate that Manuel and Miguel were somehow involved in classified military research, that they knew something they shouldn't, and were eliminated. But there's no evidence for this. No government records. No witness testimony. Nothing concrete. And then there are those who believe the men's own theory, that they really were trying to contact extraterrestrials, and that something went catastrophically wrong in the weeks after the bodies were discovered. Several witnesses came forward claiming they saw strange lights over Vintém Hill on the night of August 17th. A woman named Gracinda Barbosa de Souza, who lived near the hill, gave a detailed statement to police. She said that around 7 p.m. on August 17th, she saw a bright orange light hovering over Vintém Hill. The light was silent, she said, and it remained stationary for several minutes before suddenly shooting upward at incredible speed and disappearing. Skeptics dismiss this testimony. They say the woman was influenced by media coverage of the case, that her memory was contaminated by suggestion. But she gave her statement before any details about the men's interest in UFOs became public. How did she know to mention orange lights if she didn't really see something? The case of the lead masks has been investigated and re-investigated for nearly 60 years. Television programs, documentaries, researchers from around the world have examined every detail, and still, no one can provide a definitive answer. 2 electronics technicians traveled to a remote hillside, dressed in formal suits, carrying raincoats and lead masks. They followed a set of precise instructions, swallowed some kind of capsules, and died. Were they trying to contact aliens? Were they poisoned? Was it suicide, murder, or something far stranger? The answer, like the signal they were waiting for, never came. We leave the heat of Brazil now and travel back in time to a cold February morning in 1855, England, where an entire countryside woke to find mysterious footprints in the snow. Footprints that seemed to come from nowhere and belong to nothing on Earth. Mystery 3. The Devil's Footprints. Devon, 1855. February 8th, 1855. The people of Devon, in southwestern England, wake to a world transformed by snow. During the night, a heavy snowfall has blanketed the countryside. Everything is white and still and perfect. But as people emerge from their homes, as they step into this pristine winter morning, they notice something strange. Footprints. But not ordinary footprints. These prints are unlike anything anyone has ever seen. They're roughly 4 inches long and 3 inches wide, shaped almost like horseshoes, or perhaps, more disturbingly, like cloven hooves. But it's not just the shape that's disturbing. It's the pattern. The prints form a single line, each print placed directly in front of the last, as if whatever made them was walking on 2 legs. Not on 4 legs like a horse or deer, but upright, like a human. Or something else. The residents of a small village near Topsham are the first to notice. They follow the tracks through their village, watching as the line of prints winds through gardens, across streets, between buildings. And then they see something that makes their blood run cold. The tracks go over a barn roof. Not around the barn. Over it. The prints climb up one side of the building, cross the snow-covered roof, and descend down the other side. As if whatever made them could walk straight up walls. Word spreads quickly from village to village. And everywhere people look, they find the same tracks. Topsham, Limpstone, Exmouth, Teignmouth, Dawlish. The tracks run through gardens and farmyards. They cross open fields and dense forests. They're found on both sides of the Exe estuary, a body of water 2 miles wide. People begin to calculate the extent of this trail, and the numbers are staggering. The footprints cover an estimated 100 miles, through multiple towns and villages, all in a single night. 100 miles. To walk 100 miles in a single night, you'd have to maintain a pace of over 6 miles per hour for 16 straight hours, without stopping, without resting. That's difficult for a human in daylight, let alone in the dark, in freezing temperatures, through difficult terrain. But there's something even stranger. The tracks don't show any signs of fatigue or hesitation. They maintain the same consistent spacing throughout, the same depth in the snow, the same measured stride. It's as if whatever made these prints never tired, never slowed down, never stopped to rest. Farmers examine the tracks carefully. They're experienced men who know animal prints, who can identify every creature that roams the Devon countryside. But these prints don't match anything they know. Not horses. The hoofprint is wrong, and horses don't walk in a single line. Not deer. The prints are too uniform, too purposeful. Not badgers or foxes or any other wild animal, and certainly not human. One witness, a man named Henry Penny, follows the tracks through his property. He watches as they approach a stone wall, 6 feet high. The tracks don't go around the wall. They go up and over it. But here's what disturbs him most. On the other side of the wall, the prints resume at the exact same spacing, as if whatever made them simply floated over the wall, without breaking stride. Another witness finds the tracks leading into a hayloft. The door is closed, shut tight, but somehow the tracks go through it. Inside the loft, the prints continue, walking through the stored hay, and then exiting through the wall on the other side, through a solid wall. The most disturbing reports come from the town of Dawlish, where the tracks are found inside a drainage pipe. This pipe is only inches in diameter, far too small for any animal to fit through. But the tracks go into one end and emerge from the other, as if whatever made them had somehow compressed itself or passed through solid matter. Fear begins to spread through the Devon countryside. This is 1855, Victorian England, a time when people still believe in demons and devils, when superstition runs deep. And these footprints, these cloven hoofprints, look exactly like what people imagined the devil's feet would look like. Some villagers refuse to leave their homes. Churches hold special services. Priests bless houses. People pray for protection. Hunting parties are formed. Men arm themselves with guns and clubs. They bring dogs to track whatever made these prints. But the dogs refuse to follow the trail. They approach the tracks, sniff at them, and then back away, whining, tails between their legs. The most experienced hunting dogs, animals that have tracked foxes and deer their entire lives, will not follow these tracks. It's as if they sense something wrong, something unnatural. The story reaches the newspapers. The London Times publishes an article about the devil's footprints. Soon, the entire country is talking about what happened in Devon. Naturalists and scientists offer explanations. Some suggest it was a kangaroo that escaped from a private zoo. But kangaroos were virtually unknown in England at the time. And kangaroo prints don't look like hooves. And a kangaroo certainly couldn't walk over rooftops. Others propose it was a hare or rabbit. But rabbit tracks show 4 feet, not 2. And rabbits leave distinctive trails in snow. Nothing like what was seen in Devon. Some scientists suggest it was multiple animals, that various creatures happened to leave tracks that coincidentally formed a continuous line. But this doesn't explain the consistency of the prints, the identical size and shape over 100 miles, the impossible routes over walls and roofs. A theory emerges about balloons. Perhaps a weather balloon or some experimental craft dragging chains, bouncing across the landscape in the wind, creating marks in the snow. But this doesn't match the evidence either. The prints are too regular, too precisely spaced, and they go through buildings, not around them. The most popular scientific explanation involves a phenomenon called ice crystallization. The theory suggests that unusual weather conditions caused ice crystals to form in a peculiar hoof-like pattern, repeated across the landscape by wind and atmospheric conditions. But meteorologists point out that such a phenomenon has never been documented before or since, and it doesn't explain why the crystals would form a perfect line, or why they would appear to climb walls and cross roofs. Weeks pass. The snow melts. The tracks disappear. Life in Devon returns to normal. But people don't forget. The mystery of the devil's footprints becomes part of local folklore. Parents tell their children about it. The story passes from generation to generation. And then, in 1950, almost 100 years later, it happens again. After a snowfall in Devon, residents wake to find strange hoof-like prints in the snow. Not as extensive as the 1855 event, but eerily similar. The same shape, The same single file pattern. The same impossible routes. And then, in 2009, it happens again. A woman in Devon wakes after a snowfall and finds the same mysterious prints in her garden. She photographs them, posts them online. The images go viral. Experts examine the photographs. Some suggest they're hoax prints, made by someone aware of the legend. But the woman insists she found them exactly as shown. So what created the devil's footprints? If we dismiss the supernatural explanation, we're left with a puzzle that defies natural laws. No known animal walks upright on two legs, leaves hoof-shaped prints, and can travel 100 miles in a single night, while climbing walls and passing through buildings. No weather phenomenon creates such precise, uniform patterns. No balloon or experimental craft from 1855 could have created such a trail, while leaving no other trace of its passage. Some researchers have suggested a mass hallucination, that the tracks were ordinary animal prints, misinterpreted by people primed to see something sinister. But this doesn't explain the consistent eyewitness accounts, the documented photographs from later incidents, or the physical evidence examined by multiple witnesses. The devil's footprints remain one of England's most enduring mysteries. Investigated by scientists, debated by researchers, written about in countless books and articles. 170 years later, we still don't know what walked through Devon that February night. Was it an unknown animal? A strange weather phenomenon? An elaborate hoax? Or something that defies rational explanation? The answer, like the creature that made those prints, vanished with the snow. From 19th century England, we travel even further back, to medieval times, to a mystery that sounds like pure fantasy, but was documented by multiple medieval chroniclers. The story of two children, with skin the color of fresh grass, who appeared from nowhere, speaking an unknown language, and telling an impossible story. Mystery 4, The Green Children of Woolpit. England, the 12th century. The year is approximately 1150. Though the exact date has been lost to history, Woolpit is a small village in Suffolk. Its name comes from the old wolf pits that dot the landscape. Deep holes in the ground where villagers once trapped wolves. Back when England's forests were wild and dangerous. By the 12th century, the wolves are mostly gone. The pits remain, but they're old now, overgrown with vegetation, avoided by the local people. It's harvest season. The fields around Woolpit are golden with wheat, ready to be cut. Villagers are working in the fields, their sickles flashing in the summer sun. And then, someone hears crying. The sound of children, sobbing, frightened. The workers stop, listening. The crying is coming from one of the old wolf pits. Several men approach cautiously. They peer down into the pit, and there, huddled at the bottom, are two children, a boy and a girl. The girl appears to be about 7 or 8 years old. The boy is younger, perhaps 5. The villagers prepare to help them out of the pit. But as they get closer, they stop, frozen in shock. The children's skin is green. Not pale green, not a sickly tint, but a vivid, vibrant green, the color of fresh grass, of new leaves in spring. For a moment, no one moves. No one speaks. Then, practical necessity takes over. Whatever these children are, they're crying and frightened. They need help. The men pull the children out of the pit. Up close, the green skin is even more startling. It's not painted on. It's not a trick of light. Their skin is genuinely, impossibly, green. But that's not the only strange thing about them. Their clothes are unlike anything the villagers have seen before. Made from materials no one recognizes. Cut in strange styles. And when the children speak, crying and calling out, no one can understand their language. It's not English. It's not French or Latin. It's not any language anyone in the village has ever heard. The children are taken to the home of Sir Richard de Calne, the local landowner. He stares at them in amazement. These green-skinned children, speaking an unknown tongue, clearly terrified, clearly lost. He tries to communicate with them, pointing at objects, speaking slowly, but they don't understand. Food is brought, bread and meat, cheese and milk. But the children refuse to eat. They turn away from every dish offered. They seem frightened of the food, or perhaps they simply don't recognize it. Days pass. The children continue to refuse all food. They're wasting away, growing weaker. The villagers fear they'll starve to death. Then, someone harvests beans in a nearby field. They're bringing the harvest past Sir Richard's house when the green children see the beanstalks. Suddenly, they become animated, excited. They rush to the beanstalks. They begin tearing them open, not eating the beans themselves, but searching frantically inside the stalks. At first, the villagers don't understand. Then they realize the children are looking for the beans, but they think the beans are inside the hollow stalks, not in the pods. Someone shows them how to open the pods properly, how to extract the beans. The children eat ravenously. For days, beans are all they'll consume. Gradually, Over weeks and months, they begin to accept other foods: bread, vegetables, eventually meat. And slowly, they begin to learn English. The girl adapts more quickly than the boy. She picks up words, phrases, begins to communicate. But the boy, he doesn't adjust well. He grows increasingly despondent, withdrawn. He stops eating again, seems to give up on life. And then he dies. The records don't specify exactly when or what he died from, just that the boy, the younger of the two green children, perished. The girl remains. Over time, her skin begins to change. The vivid green color fades, gradually shifting to a more normal complexion. It takes months, but eventually, her skin looks completely normal. You wouldn't know she had ever been green. As her English improves, people begin asking her questions. Where did you come from? How did you get here? Why was your skin green? And she tells them a story. A story so strange, so impossible, that scholars are still debating it nearly 900 years later. She says she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land. This land, she explains, exists in perpetual twilight. The sun never rises there. Instead, everything exists in a state of gentle dim light, like eternal dusk. Everyone in St. Martin's Land has green skin. They all speak the same language she and her brother spoke. One day, she says, she and her brother were tending their father's herds. They heard a loud sound, like bells ringing. They followed the sound. It led them into a cavern. They walked through this cavern for a long time, following the sound of the bells. And then suddenly, they emerged into blinding light. The sun, brighter than anything they'd ever experienced. It hurt their eyes, overwhelmed them. They tried to find their way back to the cavern, but they were disoriented, confused by the brightness. They wandered, growing more and more lost. Eventually, they became separated from the cavern entirely. They couldn't find their way back. And that's when the villagers found them, crying in the Woolpit. She says she doesn't know how to get back to St. Martin's Land. The cavern entrance is lost, and even if she found it, she's not sure she could survive the journey. This is the story, as recorded by multiple medieval chroniclers, including Ralph of Coggeshall, an abbot who documented the tale in detail, and William of Newburgh, a historian known for his usually reliable accounts. Both men present this as a true story, something that actually happened. The girl, according to the records, eventually integrated into English society, she was baptized, took an English name, and some accounts say she eventually married and lived a normal life. But the mystery remains. What were the green children of Woolpit? The most common skeptical explanation is that they were Flemish orphans. In the 12th century, there were Flemish immigrants living in England. Some were persecuted, their villages attacked. Perhaps these children were orphaned in such an attack. Traumatized, they wandered into the forest, became lost, eventually emerging in Woolpit. The green skin, this theory suggests, was caused by chlorosis, a condition caused by malnutrition, particularly iron deficiency. Chlorosis can give skin a greenish tint, especially in children. Their strange language might have been Flemish, which the Suffolk villagers wouldn't have recognized. Their unusual clothes, simply foreign garments. And the story about St. Martin's Land, a confused child's attempt to describe their homeland, distorted by trauma and translation difficulties. This explanation is tidy, rational, and accounts for most of the facts. But it has problems. Chlorosis doesn't make skin bright green. It creates a pale, slightly greenish tinge. The chroniclers describe the children as vividly green, undeniably, shockingly green. And if they were traumatized Flemish orphans, why couldn't anyone communicate with them at all initially? Surely someone in the area would have recognized Flemish. Other theories are more creative. Some suggest the children came from an underground civilization. The St. Martin's Land was literally underground, existing in caverns beneath England. The perpetual twilight would make sense in such a place. The green skin, perhaps an adaptation to living without sunlight. But this requires us to believe in an entire underground society, with its own language and culture, existing beneath 12th century England, without leaving any other trace. More esoteric theories propose parallel dimensions, that St. Martin's Land existed in another reality, and somehow the children crossed over, the cavern serving as a portal between worlds. Some even suggest extraterrestrial origins, that the children were aliens, their cavern actually a crashed spacecraft. St. Martin's Land, another planet. But these theories, while intriguing, have no supporting evidence beyond the story itself. Perhaps the simplest explanation is that the entire story is a myth, a medieval legend, never meant to be taken literally. But if it's just a myth, why did two separate chroniclers, known for documenting real historical events, recorded as fact, why are the details so consistent between their accounts? The green children of Woolpit have fascinated people for nearly 900 years. The story has been analyzed, debated, retold countless times. Something happened in Woolpit in the 12th century. Two children appeared, under strange circumstances, and for reasons we may never understand. They were described as having green skin. Were they orphans with a medical condition? Children from an underground world? Visitors from another dimension? Or simply a medieval legend that happened to be written down by reliable historians? The answer, like the children's homeland, remains lost to time. We leave the medieval past now and jump forward to the 20th century, to a bridge in Scotland, where something has been happening for over 70 years. Something that defies every explanation and has earned this place the most disturbing nickname imaginable: the Dog Suicide Bridge. And so we come to the end of our journey. 6 mysteries from across time and space. We've explored the possibility of reincarnation, with 2 girls who seem to remember lives they never lived. We've stood on a tropical hillside in Brazil, trying to understand why 2 men died wearing lead masks, with a cryptic note that raises more questions than answers. We've followed mysterious footprints through the snow of Victorian England, prints that climbed walls and passed through solid matter, covering over 100 miles in a single night. We've met green-skinned children who spoke an unknown language and told stories of a land where the sun never rises, a tale documented by medieval chroniclers that still defies explanation. And we've wondered why hundreds of dogs have jumped from the same Scottish bridge, compelled by something we can't explain, returning to leap again even after surviving the fall. These mysteries remain unsolved, despite decades, sometimes centuries, of investigation. Despite the best efforts of scientists, researchers, investigators, we still don't have definitive answers. And perhaps that's what makes them so compelling. They remind us that the world, despite all our technology and knowledge, is still full of secrets, that there are things we don't understand, phenomena that don't fit neatly into our categories, events that challenge everything we think we know about consciousness, about death, about the nature of reality itself. Some of these mysteries might be solved one day. New evidence might emerge. New technologies might provide answers. But others might remain forever unknowable, lost in the past, or hidden in dimensions of reality we can't yet perceive. As you drift off to sleep tonight, think about these mysteries. Let your mind wander through the possibilities. What if consciousness really can survive death? What if there are children who appear from nowhere, speaking languages that have never been heard? What if animals can sense things we cannot, perceive dangers or presences completely invisible to us? The universe is vast, stranger than we imagine, and filled with wonders these 6 mysteries are just the beginning. There are countless others, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be understood. So rest now. The world is more mysterious, more wondrous, and more beautiful than we can ever fully comprehend.